And we're live.
Hey,
Hey, Peter. Good to see you.
hey, Jeremy. Good morning. Great to see you.
Yeah. Well, this is show number two.
Yes, which
Yeah.
is the third to engineering fashion.
True engineering fashion. Funny note. When I tried to put the podcast version of this out, podcasting software doesn't like episode 0. So,
What do
in
you
the
mean?
pod, in the, you, like you had, I had to give like episode 0. I had to actually call it episode 1, and then what we did last week was episode 2. So
Oh
in
man,
in the podcasting, the numbering, this will be episode 3, but in our title, it's still episode 2.
do
Yeah.
you know this old joke? I mean, there are variations on it, but there are three hard things in engineering. It's naming things and off by one mistakes.
Well, we started out being off by 1.
Yeah. Cool. How was your weekend?
Ah, really good. Yeah. Here in France, we had Wednesday and Thursday were public holidays, and Friday the schools where we didn't have any
Oh,
school
okay,
for our
nice.
sons. So we were 4 days in the Cevennes, which is a kind of, nature mountain, well, not mountains, hills and forest and rivers and not lakes.
Mm.
And we were glamping in like kind of like a safari tent on a platform. Super nice.
Oh,
It
wow.
was
Okay.
really, really nice.
How is
Mm.
glamping? I heard about this. I have this. To be honest, I didn't sound too attractive because where I heard it from, it was mostly influencers and everything. But I'm really curious, how was the experience?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you don't have to bring a tent. You don't have to bring dishes and so on. You just rock up
Nice.
and it's all there. We just bought our bedding and food, and yeah, so that that
Cool.
makes it easy, I mean, still you're still camping, you're still sleeping in
Yeah.
a tent, but
Yeah.
it's definitely easier. So no, it was really good, and the place we stayed in just happened to have a festival in the village nearby, so they had a bunch of, food stalls and yeah, just kind of really nice atmosphere. So,
Nice.
we
Nice.
went there a couple times. It was perfect. Yeah, just really, really
Cool.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so how about you?
Good week. As usual, I actually, there was one extra thing. I went cycling on Thursday, I think, and it was really nice. I think it
Yeah.
was one of the first proper cycling of the year. It was still like 30 something kilometers only, so nothing serious, but I enjoyed it.
I'm gonna share the picture,
Oh yeah, that was surreal. Like
in here.
that was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going on the road, looked on the right, and there was this purple hill, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, it's it made me, want to get out on my bike a bit, actually. I was, I've my bike had some issues, and, I'm a big advocate of tubeless.
Yeah.
My tubeless rims they just weren't. I mean, they're gripping on the rim right, but there's
Mm.
something that's making one tire in particular lose air more than the other, so I was constantly having to put in air, so I've gone back to, inner tubes. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, stories like this are the reason I'm walking back on. I'm fine with tubes. Yeah, it's fine.
since I put air in the tires, I haven't had to pump them up again, so I I guess I'll just have to deal with punctures.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
um,
right.
so yeah.
What happened during the week on in the work? Because we were talking about little behind the scenes that we were talking about that we could
Mhm.
include a segment about stuff that happened during the week, and yeah, I don't know there was much.
Yeah, well, you just in before you were you yeah, yeah, so on the format, what we were saying was we'll do like catching up and we'll do some if there's any tech news, we'll do that. And the one that you were mentioning that's quite interesting is the
Ah, yeah.
Apple crushing ad.
It's funny
Um,
because I saw it. I didn't see the event, but right after the event, I watched the ad without reading all the press backlash and social media backlash, and I was like, "What the hell are they thinking?" Like,
mm,
I was infuriated. There if I will put it in the show notes, but there is this short advertisement where the concept is that they have an industrial press, they compress all these objects from a trumpet to piano and
Mm.
all arcade game, everything. And when it opens, it's the new iPad Pro, and
Which is thinner.
which is thinner. Yeah. Okay. So, but I really think I don't want to go too far, and I'm not a big Apple fanboy, but it's really disrespectful to what Steve Jobs used to represent about appreciating handcraft and appreciating all these beautiful
Creativity.
objects that they
Mm.
destroyed. And it's just really sad. But I don't want to go as far as what Apple became to, but and they apologized since
Mm.
and calling back. But the fact that this could, I think they were feeling that this is not right because sometimes they were going to the extra mile of being like absurdly, I don't know, destructive when they were crushing these little cute toys and everything. I guess they were feeling that something is not gonna lay well with this, so they chose to over exaggerate to make it seem a bit absurd. I don't know. What do you think about it?
So I watched it just before. I'd read about it, but I watched it, and I understand why people are upset, and I agree with you. This is Apple. My view is that Apple have lost their way. They were the
Mm,
cool company, the underdog,
mm.
and that
Yeah, the
1984
'84
commercial.
advertisement. Yeah, that
Yeah,
what I was thinking. Yeah.
and I mean, they make a great phone. I use it. They make great hardware. I use Mac, but I'm actually dual booting with Linux now because
Okay.
Asahi Linux is slowly getting better and better, but not quite fully there. But maybe I'll do one live stream at some point from Linux just to test it out,
Okay.
test the
Very
limits.
good. Yeah.
But I feel a few things. First of all, the iPad is totally lost. And they are announcing an M4 chip in an iPad. There's like a desktop chip, and
Mm,
the iPad OS is just too limited to use the
mm,
chip. So
mm,
I just wish that they would make the iPad almost run like the Mac, instead of making the Mac more like an iPad. Um, so I think they're definitely that device is lost, and maybe the advertising around it is a bit lost too.
mm.
Um, Amazing
Yeah.
technology to get thinner, but so what?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
you don't need a new
There
iPad.
is
Like,
no,
the
yeah,
old
nobody
iPad
needs an
does what the
iPad.
new one
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
I mean, arguably, nobody needs an iPad, period. Like, not many people. Like, folks are asking sometimes, like I'm considering buying an iPad, but I don't think why I would need it. And I have an iPad, and I like it when
Mm,
I'm flying, but it's like the Air 2 or something. It's an ancient device.
yeah,
It works fine. It plays videos, and that's it. I don't think many
yeah,
people, like, I know a graphic designer who she really needs it. Like,
mm,
it's better than a Wacom table,
yeah,
but otherwise, it's a luxury device. You don't need it.
yeah. I think it's a niche device now. I mean,
Mm,
I wasn't using mine. The thing I was using the iPad and I love about it is that the keyboard. I have an older one that was like a
mm,
older Pro, and the keyboard is amazing to type on.
mm,
It's really compact, and I loved it for kind of like focus mode writing when I was on a train or an airplane. And I don't travel much now,
yeah,
that much
yeah,
anymore. Anyway, I use my laptop now for it, and I think, like, for most people, the best thing is to get a MacBook Air,
yeah, yeah,
for, like,
definitely,
almost
yeah,
everybody, and, so I gave my iPad, to my partner, and
mm,
all she uses it for is watching media,
yeah,
um,
yeah. I
so
think that's the majority of these cases. But I like what you mentioned, the focus mode. Maybe it's a good segue to to today's content because this is, I think, where Apple's where iPads and this kind of limited use devices, iPad OS also can excel is counterintuitively
mm,
not being able to multitask so well, and forcing you to single task and focus on the one thing that you're doing. Should it be writing or
mm,
watching something? Or like, I think they are moving towards multitasking with all the setting up the screen and sharing it between two applications, or having the video playing in the corner while you're doing something. But I don't think that's the strong side of an iPad. I think the
mm.
strength lies within embracing the single tasking and being able to better focus.
Yeah, at the same time, and this is a good segue actually to your article, and it was completely not planned, but the I think the problem with so the iPad is great for that focus and, have, like, a little bit side by side if you're trying to do something, but it's sometimes you just wanna plug in, like, have a keyboard and mouse and be like, if you think about, like, and have the full power of the desktop app,
Mhm.
um and it can theoretically run a desktop app,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
for
thinking
sure.
about, like, what was it, things like coding, video editing. There's a
Mm.
bunch of, like, power uses that you could like, it could replace a laptop if they just I think if they let it run the desktop Mac version of the app, and obviously that means I think the other thing is they're not opening up the OS, like, they don't
Yeah.
it's still super locked down and you
Yeah.
just don't
I mean,
use it.
the whole App
Yeah.
Store thing, and we could talk a lot probably about
Mm,
this recent EU decision that they need to open up their app
mm,
stores in the EU. On a Mac, I can install whatever I want. There are these warnings and
mm,
everything, but it's really straightforward to just download something and install it,
mm.
or dual boot Linux.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Peter, and I like the title. So you wrote an article
Mhm.
this week. Why can't I focus?
Yeah, actually, it was. I think I wrote it in the Friday newsletter that it was a last minute change because the work title was "Why can't you focus?"
Mm.
And when I was doing the editing, I realized it's very pretentious to think that I can tell why somebody else cannot focus. So it's more humble if I just write about why can't I focus. Well, and the
I
article
was
is
going to
about
say,
that.
was it prompted also because I was interrupting you in the middle of? Oh,
No, no, no. No, I wanted to write about this since a long time. I think even in the week before Friday edition, I said that I want to write about focus.
mm,
I mean, it's
yeah.
something I'm struggling with in the 25 years of my career. It's interesting that I was looking at being able to multitask very efficiently. Uh,
Mm,
by efficient, I mean that I can keep them separate contexts and have, I don't know, three monitors and
mm,
like being like a pilot. I looked at it as something good, and I'm just recently realizing that it's very bad. And I'm embracing single tasking more and more. Uh, I maybe it's just a change in how I work, but
mm,
I find that multitasking is not just destroying the focus in the moment. Actually, in the moment, I can be very focused in more than one thing, but it's really draining the energy and it's really building up mechanisms that
mm,
are not helpful when I need to focus on one thing. It's multitasking means that I'm constantly having stimuli. I don't know the plural
mm,
of stimulus in English,
yeah.
but a lot of stimuli at the same time, and my brain gets used to
Mm,
it and gets addicted to it. So when I have a one piece of white paper in front of me and I need to focus on writing one article, my brain is, demanding
mm,
the excitement that it got used to when I was multitasking. And it's similar with other activities. I'm watching a movie and it gets a bit boring and I feel the urge to grab my phone and check what's up or
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's one aspect.
I'm gonna ask probably more about it, but, you mentioned, like, going into more single-threaded mode and stuff like that, like, it's interesting because you mentioned in the article only using, like, the one screen now.
Yeah. I've
It's
been
actually
using one
yeah,
screen since a long time. I don't have
yeah.
external monitor.
Yeah, I think I'm on a single screen now for quite a long time, like 4 or 5 years at
Yeah.
least. I
Same.
had and actually I had, like, one 32-inch screen at
Mhm.
one point, but then that's like multitasking on that. But since the 15-inch MacBook Pro, like,
Mhm.
has a really good screen, and
Yeah.
since I've had one of those for the last since they came out pretty much, I've eliminated the extra screen, the external screen
Mm.
now. I'm
Mm.
just on this one screen, and it's raised. It's on, like, a stand in front of me,
Yeah.
but, and I have an external keyboard and,
same.
I'm
Yeah,
not a mouse person actually. I'm
yeah.
applicant, but I'm a trackpad. Oh,
Oh,
sorry, a
nice. Okay,
trackball.
you
Yeah.
won.
For the weirdness factor,
Yeah, that's cool. Good for
wrist.
your wrist. Thank you. Yeah.
That's why I did it.
Okay.
I was mouse, but and I don't really trackpad. I don't know. Yeah, but the ball is takes a bit of getting used to, but it's good.
I mean, I have two reasons for the trackpad. First is that I really want to have the very close resemblance of the environment I have at home
Mm,
and remotely
mm,
when I go to an office or something.
mm,
So I have a trackpad on the Mac, so I have
mm,
an external trackpad, so I don't need to learn two things. And the second thing is that there are a lot of cool keyboard,
mm.
not keyboard, like these finger shortcuts
Swipes.
that I can
Yeah,
do, swipes and pinches and everything. And once you learn it, it
mm,
can be very efficient.
yeah. Well, I kind of do both. So I do have like I know all the swipes and stuff, but
Mm.
I have a second one.
Yeah, nice.
One is wireless, and I kind of take it with me, and then the
Okay,
wired one is plugged into the
so
dock.
you hacked it. Yeah,
Yeah, and then
nice.
I just take the keyboard. 'Cause if I'm really going to be working remotely, then I have like a fold out stand. I can put the laptop on the
Mm.
stand. Actually, you might have seen it in the office when we were working
Yeah,
together, but like I had the stand and up
yeah,
and then a keyboard.
yeah. That's what I have at home. Actually, I don't have a monitor.
Mm,
I have an elevated
yeah.
stand for the Mac and external keyboard and trackpad. All right,
So
enough
we're talking
geekery.
about focus, and we drifted already.
Yeah, exactly. Very good illustration of the topic at hand.
Well, actually, I was curious. I think both of us are focusing on engineering management managers, engineering leaders, leaders in tech, and
Mm,
so on. And I think the question I had is in your article you had a list of different sort of reasons that were kind of like cause people to have struggle with focus and so on.
I mean,
Um,
I'm talking about my experience, just to
yeah,
be
yeah,
clear. Yeah,
your
yeah,
experience, but
yeah,
probably quite common for a lot of people.
yeah.
I identified with with all of them. But I was curious, from an engineering manager, what are the common reasons that engineering managers struggle for focus?
Mm,
And do you have any practical tips that you can
okay.
share for them?
I mean, I'm hesitating a bit because it really depends on the person, but maybe I would say multitasking and distractions are the highest robber of focus or destroyer of
Mm,
focus. And yeah, the tips is just to embrace single tasking and it's interesting to be single tasking because what essentially it says is for me is to get comfortable with being bored,
mm,
uh, accept and embrace that work is hard and don't jump to the easier things when you face an obstacle. I guess it's also in the single tasking. It
yeah.
relates to this shiny new thing syndrome also that I think is I'm also very gullible to it. Like
Mm,
I know I need to work on something and I find one aspect of it more interesting. Let me find an example. Like I don't know, like when you need to build something and you start to research if there is something already available, an open source thing, and then an hour later you find yourself debugging a Linux build, just to be able to run this little thing that you might not even gonna be using at the end, and just yeah, losing focus.
I did that a little bit last week actually.
Mhm.
Because we did our first live recording, we tried to get it out, which I think we did, and then I started realizing that like pasting the links for like the YouTube
Yeah,
and everything everywhere was becoming really painful, and our LinkedIn page,
yeah,
kind of where do you link the one website that you have to
yeah.
and so on, and then I was like, "Oh, we really could do with some kind of, like, homepage for the retrospective," and,
I remember. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. That's a very
also
good example. Thank you, Jeremy.
it's the shiny new thing, and so I
Yeah.
did a bit of research. I'd already done some research 'cause I'd thought about this a little bit, so there was a project that I had an eye on, And there's a commercial website called Linktree. I think it's called
Mm,
Linktree, and does a great job. And actually, my partner uses it for the free version because it works really great for her.
yeah,
And I was like, well, no, I'm a self-hosting home labber, so I'm going to run an open source version of it, which you can see in
yeah.
the retrospective.com, our new website. So to get a,
Nice
we
plug.
got it. It's live. um, the ironic thing about that was actually it was a super simple thing to set up. Small
I mean,
detail.
most of the time it is, which is too bad because it
Mm,
gives you a feedback of, oh
mm,
yeah, this was a good idea to go into one. But actually, I don't think it's a good idea to go
no,
into. But
it it took me I
yeah,
said I'll do it. It should take me less than an hour. And frankly,
mm,
actually, it would have taken me less than an hour, except as these things always do, I ran into a bug. Not a bug, but just a sharp edge. Um, Essentially, short version in their Docker Compose, they recommend using volumes. I didn't want to use a
mm,
volume. I wanted to use a path on disk because that's how all my containers are. But if you don't use a volume, it doesn't. You mount it, it just gets it doesn't populate the empty thing. So if you run the pure container, it worked directly. But
okay,
then when I wanted to mount my file, I needed to download the whole thing and copy it on, change permissions, and that whole thing took like that was the rabbit hole
yeah.
that lost time.
But
Anyway, we're
this is
live.
what I mean exactly.
Yeah.
Like these kind of things,
Mm,
they always happen. Like
mm,
sometimes it's permissions, sometimes it's DNS, sometimes
mm.
there is
It's always
always
DNS.
something that it always. But my point is that yeah, I guess a tip for this is that
Mm,
the Pomodoro technique. When you set a timer
mm,
for 25 minutes, you work on something, you take a break. I find it efficient. I could never stick to it, but I like
mm,
the idea. And I think if somebody uses that, they can take the opportunity during this break or
mm,
right after finishing or before starting the next work segment, they can just sit back and what have I been doing?
mm,
Why was I doing it? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? Just stick back to the original goal. Like
mm,
for us, the original goal for you was to I don't know, set up, publish the video. It was not the website. It was not the link
mm,
tree alternative or anything. So
mm,
maybe you could have used this opportunity and say, okay, let's leave this rabbit hole
mm,
and focus on what we are doing. Obviously, it's very different for a hobby project, but in a work context, I think it can be very hard but
mm,
powerful also to be able to say that, oh shit, the last 25 minutes,
mm.
it's not the good direction. Let's get out of
Yeah.
this and focus on what I want to achieve.
So I think something that I've been starting to experiment in, and I think it's directly translatable back to being an engineering manager, is pairing and also just being kind of online. Like a lot of us are working remote or part of the time remote, and um, being online with someone um, and saying at the beginning of the hour, "This is what I'm planning to do for the next hour," and then just having that person in the background, maybe either on mute or not even muted, but just doing that thing. And I think that's a um, that's something I've been experimenting with a little bit because I've been struggling with I've talked about it, struggling with focus. And there's a couple of apps. I'll put some links in the show notes as well. One I've been experimenting with, and I think it's quite interesting. Just it's amazing how it brings focus to the conversation. I think
Yeah.
we've always been saying when I've been
It's about
coaching
yeah,
teams, use pairing, like
yeah.
get pair, and it's really this high resistance from people to do it. But I think there is a greater productivity of both people if you both also work on the same thing. Sometimes that's possible. Sometimes it's just being stating your intent and then saying how it went at the end is already like a focusing thing.
That's very
Accountability.
interesting. Yeah, I see that working, and I saw that working when I was pairing
Mm,
with someone or that's a very good idea. I think it
mm,
also helps with accountability. Like you're together with another person. You
mm,
you shouldn't go into the rabbit hole. You should
mm.
you should do the work together that you're here to do.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good concept.
I think like when you have to focus and you're talking about focus stuff, I think there's a couple things. Like I think the first bit on focus is I found AI is good for is getting like a skeleton or a draft, or getting off the blank page
Mm.
It can be helpful. A lot of focus is kind of maybe writing a document or preparing a presentation or whatever. And I
mm,
think like getting the initial momentum going, getting that, and I think you can also do that with
mm,
a partner. And I think one of the things I recommend is if you're going to be building something, find a colleague and pair with them on it. Or find someone in the team or whatever and pair.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess to finish your thought, maybe if you cannot do that, the second best thing could be to pair with an AI,
Yeah. It's not the
bounce off
same.
ideas. It's totally not the same, of course,
Mm,
but I like the idea of using AI to unblock yourself,
mm,
like when you get the intimidation from the blank
yeah.
page, and you just say, okay, give me 5 bullet points about this
Mm,
topic, and then you realize that half of them are stupid, but you're
yeah.
at least you can start working on something.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is, I mentioned time boxing, but
Yeah.
and you mentioned it too, kind of inherently, like so block bits of your calendar,
Oh yeah.
um, and just like uh use a Pomodoro, do something to yeah, like even just write down what you want to do. I found that
Mm,
if I write in my notebook
yeah. Mhm.
what I wanted to do today, and then I just yeah, exactly, then it's amazing that's quite focusing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point actually, and even having a very low bar for
Mhm,
for success, what you want to achieve. What I do nowadays is I have one priority thing I want to get
mm,
done that day, and I write it down at the beginning of the day in my notebook that this is what I want to. This is my priority for today, and under that I have an SS and that I leave empty, and I fill it out at the end of the day. And this is
mm,
where I reflect on how the day was going, if I was successful in achieving this, and how it felt, and what I did to make it a success.
mm,
Or if I didn't, then why didn't I get to do this? And I find this exercise similarly to journaling
mm,
or other things, a retrospective, useful. It's good because it ensures that you're not missing out on learnings if there was a failure in your priority. But
mm,
I really like the positive aspect also. I especially when I'm working alone, I mean, I'm human. I like feedback, and if there is nobody to give feedback to me, then I can use this as a win diary or a list of wins I did. And looking back at the end of the week or end of the month, it's good to boost self confidence also
mm.
to see all the stuff you achieved. And yeah,
And actually, that was the kind of where I was gonna go next is, right, okay, Peter, actually, I think I find you as mm, think you're someone that's quite, good at self-management, getting stuff done, focus, time boxing,
let me stop you there. I'm good at portraying this image.
But is it the swan? You look serene on the surface, and the feet are paddling desperately underneath the
Oh
surface.
man, yeah, it's a struggle. No, but I since forever, those of you who speak Hungarian, I will put in the show notes an old article I wrote on a Hungarian blog that I used to write with a few friends about the perfect task management system that I found, and it was a series, and I told about all the stuff I used before. I had a
Mm.
old Psion computer actually still here. I'm not. No, I'm gonna because it's cool.
Oh,
This
awesome.
I don't know if you remember this or you
Yeah.
saw this. It was an old.
Mhm.
It was really cool. It had a very good
I wrote
keyboard.
bits of the operating system for those.
Oh wow, you win.
No, but, like, yeah.
Okay,
When it turned into the
journey's done
Nokia
now again.
OS, the Symbian OS from that
Yeah.
went into then the Nokia smartphones, and that was my first job. It was
Oh
working
wow.
on
Okay.
the OS for
Nice.
someone.
Nice. Okay, but keeping focus here.
Mm.
So I wrote about and the end of the last part of the article was that the system that I was using at the
Mm,
time was a system based on paper notes and everything.
mm,
And I used it for a long time, but then I abandoned it and switched to something else. And I guess this is the story of my task management history is that I try something, I use it, and then I slowly abandon it, and I didn't realize yet why that's the case. But I'm keeping things like this writing in a notebook thing.
Mm,
I'm not going to show it too long because I don't want you to read it, but it's been sticking with me. I have actually a lot of old ones behind me and files somewhere for the last, I don't know, at least 7, 8 years I've been using in some form. Now I'm experimenting with using Notion and Notion tasks. Um,
mm,
I set up a system with iOS shortcuts and even wire to Siri and everything. Wherever I am, I can just say Siri quick task,
mm.
and just whatever I'm telling, it's gonna jump into as a new item in my inbox. And once a day, that's the ideal, but I often forget. I'm just triaging my inbox and deleting stuff or organizing stuff. But yeah, the ideal is that now what I'm playing with is that I have Notion and I have
Mm.
daily triages and daily focus things, priority things, and assessments at the end of the week. I think those are the important cornerstones.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, are you in your notebook, first of all, are you following some kind of format like bullet journal or
Yeah,
something?
I do the bullet journal. I mean, I
Mhm,
started to I realized it's important to when you're looking at a new technique, you start out
mhm,
by as the author intended. Because when I was younger, I was like, "Oh, this is
mm,
interesting. Let me take these two things of it and adapt it immediately, etc." Now I'm a bit more humble. I try
mm,
out as the author intended. So I did the classic bullet journal for like a month, but
mm,
some of the things were redundant, like I didn't move all the calendar events of the
mhm,
day to the notebook also. I can see value in it, and but having everything at one place, that's very powerful.
mhm,
But it was just too complex. So I part of my stuff is in my calendar and part of my stuff is in my notebook,
mhm.
Notion.
Just a next question, so you end up with a lot of tasks that go into Notion.
Yeah.
How do you kind of prioritize and, like, how do you collect and organize them? And then how does that turn into your day? Like, what's the flow,
Yeah.
for
Currently,
you?
the flow is tied to the Friday newsletter. Actually, that
Mhm,
when I'm writing the newsletter on Friday, and it was coming from where we work together. That
mhm,
I was writing 15 fives, looking back the week
mhm,
and planning the next week. That's when I decide what should I focus on next week. Ideally,
mhm,
sometimes it doesn't work so well,
mhm,
and at the beginning of the day, I pick up a task for the day, and
mhm.
yeah, something like this.
Okay, yeah, so it's kind of like loosely you're kind of like having a weekly retrospective,
Hmm.
which also is your weekly update, and which is kind
Yeah.
of like, "What did I do? How
Yeah,
did I do?" And then you think forward of, "What do I wanna do next
yeah,
week?" I
yeah,
like it. I really
yeah.
like
And
it.
I have moment of panic when
Mm,
I realize that I'm not working towards my goals,
mm.
and then I reshuffle everything. But set up longer term, like things
Yeah.
that get me closer to my like when I started my site, this petersize.com and
Mm,
newsletter and everything, I had something in mind that I'm going to
mm,
use the time till the end
mm,
of the summer to
mm,
cover most engineering leadership aspects. And what I found after 3 months is that I'm very ad hoc and reactive and not
mm,
as much structured and planned as I want it to be. So I
mm,
I started a page in Notion about listing the topics that I want
mm,
to write about, and I'm trying to progress towards that. But
mm.
it's a hit and miss.
Yeah, I'm on a similar trajectory.
Mm,
I've started quite theoretical, on a lot
mm,
of my topics, sort of wanting to move to more nitty-gritty actionable
mm.
topics, as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, just to close this topic, there is also an important aspect that I don't think I mentioned in the article, but
Mm,
I don't think the goal should be spending every waking minute being super efficient and focused on
mm,
everything. That's unrealistic. And if somebody tries to do that, they are just setting themselves up for disappointment and failure. I think part of a happy life is to acknowledge and embrace and accept that yeah, there are times where we just cannot focus, and times where we just play with something that's fun, or have an after lunch nap,
Mm,
or whatever. It's fine. And it's much worse to try to be very focused all the time, trying out different techniques, and being stressed about this whole focus stuff. It's much worse than accepting that, yeah, there are so many things I'm not gonna get done, and it's sad because those were cool stuff, but that's life. I'm focusing on the one thing that I want to get done this week, and
mm.
I'm hoping I will get to the end of it.
There's a so the I like that. You need that kind of slack time, and you had a quote
Oh
there on
yeah, the
LinkedIn
team
about
aspect of
from
this
Tom
whole, yeah,
DeMarco and the
yeah,
book Slack and stuff, but
yeah,
it's interesting because it also made what you were saying made me think about an article that you shared ages ago with me
mm,
around, time boxing and hobbies and boundaries or something like that, and I
mm,
think I took some notes. I'm putting a note to self to try and dig up the thing and put it in the show notes, but, um yeah, it was a bit about this, what you were saying, like, y
mm,
give yourself some time boxes around
mm,
those those slack times as well. Don't let it
yeah,
bleed too much. Um,
yeah. It's I had this more concrete realization about this after reading this book, The 4,000 Weeks.
mhm,
It's basically, the book is about this, that you need you're gonna have a happier life if you accept face and accept mortality, that you're not
mm,
gonna be able to get all the things done that are important for you, and just focus on getting a few of them done that are really important, and you're gonna be happier.
yeah,
And contrary to intuitively, you're gonna be more productive also. That's my point. Like, if and going back to engineering leadership, if you carry this philosophy to that and say, okay, I'm leading a team, we have a challenging big scope, we have a lot of tech debt, we have a lot of new features to come, etc. We could try to balance to progress a little bit on every front, but it's just going to burn out the team, and we're going to get eventually
mhm,
delayed and miss deadlines and piss up a lot of stakeholders. Or we can just say, okay, we are disciplined. We take on, I don't know, one big thing and maybe two or three small things every month. And we just make sure we finish on those, and we focus on selecting what should be that one thing that's the most impactful one. And yeah, having a predictable cadence of sustainable delivery.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, that is the eternal challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I wanted to switch gears,
Let's do
talk
that.
about
Yeah. Talk a little
your
about
well,
me.
I think the last one was really this, so you
Oh yeah.
the CTO craft, CTO compensation survey report, interesting in and of itself, but there was a stat in here that stood out, and I've highlighted it here. That
Mm,
41% of engineering leaders are looking to leave their current businesses, and the highest reason is lack of faith in leadership, concerns about the company culture. Uh, well done, all CEOs who did return to office. I'm sure that's a significant part of this change, as well as maybe a more of the environment of zero interest rates disappearing, and
yeah.
we're in a wartime mode, and
Yeah.
that's just generally driving like kind of a lot of interesting tactics that aren't necessarily constructive. And
Mm,
I don't know, but I'm just curious. That means that maybe people listening to this are in that same category.
mm,
So what advice would you give to someone who's in this situation? They want to get out. Um, they haven't left yet. Maybe they're also feeling a bit trapped.
mm.
Increasingly feeling a dissonance between their values and the organization's. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
advice around the situation, around the job market? What would you say?
I mean, I just want to emphasize even more how hard it is for engineering leaders, because
Mm,
it's, as an individual contributor, you have this dilemma within you that the company is changing in a direction that you don't agree with, you like facing leadership, etc. It's within you. But as a leader, you have this duality that you have your own feelings and thoughts, but you need to represent and motivate the team, and it's much harder on engineering managers, I think. My advice would be, don't do anything sudden and harsh, and it's hard out there to find something new. Um, I think it's helpful to try to get an objective picture of your current situation. Like, I'm pretty sure that any change that seems drastic doesn't drastically change the whole work experience. There are a lot of stuff at every company that, when they're good, we just take it for granted. The opportunity to work on the latest tech stack, to have nice colleagues and inspiring work
Mm,
relationships, all this stuff, and there could be a million others that we take for granted, and they can probably negate the feeling of a bad change, or mitigate for it. Also, something that happens now seems much bigger than
mm,
a month later. So no, I don't think there should be rush decisions, but once you drew the line and you decided that you cannot do it anymore, then yeah, just pull the plug. You're gonna be fine.
mm. I mean, pull the plug in a sense, quit or
Yeah,
no?
I mean, there is a point where it's really hard to give any advice because it's really case by case. I
Mm,
don't know if you're a very hands-on line
mm,
manager that still misses coding, you have much better chance of finding something new than
mm,
someone who's, I don't know, like like us, senior
mm,
or director level engineering
yeah,
managers, who are not hands-on.
mhm.
In this climate, it's much harder for the likes of us. I don't want to complain, but there are just less opportunities.
There are.
Because organizations are getting flatter, they are cutting levels of management.
Mhm,
As you said, we are in a
mm,
wartime mode, and maybe we can explain a bit what you meant by
mm.
that, and what it means to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I think, like, the person who's been writing a lot about this is, you have to say his name because it's a
Gergely
Hungarian name.
Orosz. Yeah.
Say it again?
Gergely Orosz. On the
But
pragmatic engineer. Just say the pragmatic
but he
engineer.
has the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter, and, Gergely's really explained that very well in his newsletter,
Mm,
that we were coming out of a period of 0 interest rates where there was essentially free money, for organizations, and, that meant that it was really easy to raise money, really easy, to, show a bit of growth and get more money, and that meant that organizations could just be fatter. It was growth was more important, and this is my second cycle, by the way, going through kind of growth phase where
yeah,
growth was everything, and then suddenly, growth isn't, and the stock market and everything, the valuation is just on profitability, and
yeah,
it's such a sharp, painful shift, and what that means is that organizations need to be profitable. The fundamental People start looking at the fundamental bottom line of a business, and that means that results and profitability matter, and then you have and you can't raise, so you have a definitive, like, runway. Your organization will have a runway and will run out of cash, and they won't raise money unless they really do hit that next target. So yeah, it creates a different environment, and, what we're seeing and what you're saying is organizations are getting flatter where they would have had maybe more levels of management. They're eliminating a middle level, they're compressing, they're putting I've seen, stories of managers having to manage 20, 25, 30
mm,
people. What I've seen firsthand is, line managers being, expected to code and
mm,
manage a team of maybe
mm.
even up to 8 people, which is, a lot of
Crazy.
people,
Yeah,
to code and do all of that. And, yeah, and it's just a very different environment.
yeah. I mean, the way I would say it is that having having a more healthy or more robust culture, it's not just a prerequisite for growth, because
Mhm,
a lot of companies face it like this, that, okay, I set up the structure now. Every manager manages 3, 4 people. There
mm,
are middle managers, etc. And when we are growing, the organization will still sustain. That's one thing. but the other thing is being more healthier, more focusing on the work experience.
mm,
But these are all long-term investments. When the whole question is there going to be a company in the long term, or are
mm,
we just, running out of cash in 2 months or 2 quarters, and that's it? Then those are not important priorities. The important
mm,
priority is to survive. So
mm.
it's a different way. And that's why I would, to tie back to the original question, that's why I would not advise leaders who are disappointed about company culture to jump ship. And actually, this is the reason for the high number. I think, like, I don't think there are that much more people, leaders wanting to leave a company. It's just that before those people, they were just leaving. So they just said, okay, I don't have to put up with this shit. There are recruiters asking every week if I'm interested. I'm just gonna go into a process, find a new company, and leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those people are at their companies now and bringing up this number to 41%.
There's less and less people knocking on the door saying, "Hey, I've got a new job. Do you want to
Oh,
come?"
yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah,
past
yeah.
interview process and you're through and all the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and probably a good segue to the article I wrote about trying to change
Yes.
culture and so on, but
Perfect.
I would say, as you said, everyone's situation is different, but you very much need to figure out, like, there's a financial aspect to jobs and stuff as well. So, um, I think sometimes you just have to kind of eat shit. Maybe the not safe for work statement, but like, sometimes you just have to go with it because you don't have a choice. But I would say that if you don't feel like you're fully in alignment, you should be um, dusting off your CV, updating your LinkedIn profile,
Keep your options
um,
open.
keep your
Yeah.
options open, make more options for yourself. Um, if being, if that hybrid manager and hands-on coding kind of role is something that would suit you, then get back into a little bit of that. Do a little
Mm.
bit in your day to day, and make options for yourself, like you say. Like I think I
Yeah.
would definitely say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, final thought is that work shouldn't be 100% of your life, and it shouldn't be the thing that defines you as a person, because
Mhm,
then yeah, the stakes are much higher. Like, if everything goes well, that's fine. But if things
mm,
start to go bad, or there is a change that you disagree with, then it's going to impact your health. But going back to the topic of change, you
mm,
wrote a nice long article about change, and I think it's, as we mentioned, it's very timely. Also,
mhm.
a lot of companies changing, a lot of organizations are changing. There is a lot of friction with every. Can we say there is friction with every change? I think we can say that. Like, even the best managed change has some friction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this one is kind of brewing in me. I
Mm,
think this, like, I would say that just the topic of transformation and change and culture has
mm.
been a topic that I've been kind of living in and thinking about for a long time. And here
Yeah.
I wanted to capture kind of like, why is it hard?
Mm.
You know, that was the core of this article, but I did talk about what is culture and change and that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I think you covered all aspects very well. I had some random questions.
Mhm,
One of them, I think I struggled with this since a while. Like, you mentioned that the way to change culture is not to first change how people think, but instead start by changing how people behave, what they do.
mhm,
So basically, I don't know where this quote was from, but
mhm,
yeah, this is it. This is a little bit in contrast to what I believe in.
mhm,
It's from David Marquez, that you don't change people, change the environment. Or
mhm,
he even said that if you're looking for someone to change, go change yourself. Like, that's the only person you have
mhm.
realistically have a chance to change. But I realized that essentially changing culture is changing people's behavior. So how do you resolve this conflict, or there is no conflict and I'm just missing something?
So when you're a leader, like in David Marquez's case, submarine commander,
Mhm.
um, you are given a title and a position that enables you to do it. So you are able to create the context. So I think you set the tone and the values and expectations that shape the culture, the things that people do. And so that is the driver of change. So I think the to culture is basically how people do things. That's what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
culture is, if we're really helpful with each other and friendly, and that's because people all do that, right? And then it's also when they join a company, they realize, oh, everyone's just really nice around here, and they really help. And then when a new person joins, they act the same way. And whereas if they join another company and everything's really guarded and closed and whatever, then and it's a different culture, it's a different behavior, and so I think I'm agreeing with you in saying that leadership has to create the context for that. Um, but in order to change the culture, you have to shift the context. You have to shift the behavior. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. The way I try to resolve it in myself is that, yes, you're changing people's behavior. It's hard, but you're changing it indirectly by
mm,
changing the environment. You're just setting up the environment that makes some kind of behavior really easy to do for
mm,
people and some kind of behavior really hard to do for some
mhm.
people. And by this environmental nudges, you essentially changing people's behavior because it's going to require more effort and more friction to do the
Mhm.
undesired behavior.
I'll give you an example. When I became the CTO of Traveldo, we had a ton of incidents, stuff crashing and failing a lot of the time, and the team were really heroic in dealing with it. And I think we're kind of two things that were happening. One was it was such a common occurrence, and we just had a handful of people that were dealing with it, and nobody like they felt the pain heavily, but then like a lot of other people didn't, and people who actually wrote the code and were not necessarily involved. So, but there were two changes I think like that we made. The first one was I stopped that I think I can't remember exactly the language, but it was like incident, and there was a whole kind of like a negative investigation to find fault with the situation.
Mhm, mhm,
And so I used the word learning. What did we learn from this?
mhm.
And I really said, this is a great learning moment. And it was really like, wow, great chance to learn again. And that was definitely one. And the other one was moving the pain closer to the people who like wrote and owned the software, the kind of the whole DevOps philosophy, and interrupting the flow of development to try and actually you know escalate further and closer to the engineers, so that
What do you mean exactly? Like, can you have an example of moving the pain closer to
well,
developers?
we just basically we had like a support team who were fielding the customer in
Ah,
the
I see.
moment, and
Mhm,
then we had like a kind of second line support in engineering who kind of worked with them, but they kind of went through tickets a little bit, and then the engineers, they were really buffered, and sometimes like engineers would you would only get to the engineer on an instant later, much later in the process, or even like a couple of days
mhm.
if we had a long running problem with something that really was badly broken.
Yeah.
And we kind of just switched that. We actually adopted, I would say, like a version of like a swarming approach where we triage stuff as it came in, and then directly moved the on-call engineers onto that. And we still needed the second line support because they typically had production access, whereas
Mhm.
necessarily not always devs didn't always have production access because of security and compliance and lots of good reasons that we shifted that over time as well based on what we learned. And that was that learning and taking actions and making changes. Um, but that was a shift in behavior that we made that leadership needed to provide, like needed to provide the
Yeah.
nudge, needed to shift it. But then over time, I think the team started to own that much more, and it became a much more autonomous behavior. So
Yeah. But even
yeah.
even in this, you change the environment first, like you
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
through
And that
conscious actions and initiatives, you surfaced these support problems to the
yeah.
engineers.
And so
It was not like you were not trying to change the behavior by saying, okay, from now on, I'm going to be absurd, but you need to pay attention to customers' problems and feel their pain. No, you did little nudges in the
Of course.
environment that
Yeah.
moved them to this direction.
And that's why I believe, and I think I'm not when you said the statement, I was like, "Oh, maybe someone misunderstood my article," because it is leadership's responsibility. That's
Yeah.
why you're there, to drive that, and to usually leaders have a mandate to change something and deliver some kind of results. Usually it's deliver results, and then the question is like, how are you gonna do that?
Mm.
And, are you gonna scorch the earth and, rape and pillage your way to some level of fake success over a short period of time? Or are you gonna build a a baseline that builds psychological safety and trust, that feels slow, but then you slowly accelerate into productivity that, maybe people haven't recognized? And
Slow
obviously, you
is
know
smooth
which
and
camp
smooth is fast.
yeah, exactly.
I love
And
that.
I'm much more in that camp of, build the
Yeah, no,
baseline.
I agree with that. I guess it's just there are some kind of leaders who don't embrace this fact that it's really hard to change people's behavior, and it's
Mm,
much harder to change this behavior directly just by telling them to change the
mhm,
behavior. So for me, earlier in my career, this was a huge, not just realization, but revelation of it that no, it's hard because it's not possible to do. You need
mhm.
to shape the environment so like a river, people will flow into the direction where you want.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
I have one more. I can put it on the screen. There is. You have three kind of organizations in
Mhm,
typologies. The pathological one that's power oriented, the
mhm,
bureaucratic one that's rule oriented, and the generative one that's
mhm,
performance oriented. And all the descriptions, it's very explicit that
mhm,
this is the generative one that you believe could be high performing, that's
mhm.
healthy, that has a long, sustainable, healthy performance. I guess to be devil's advocate, can you imagine organizations that are pathological or bureaucratic that can still be successful and high performing?
Um, so short answer, yes. I will say on this organizational typology, I think it's a spectrum, where you kind of have the edges, the far edge extremes, and then there's some kind of middle mark, and there is a spectrum of these.
Mm, yeah.
But I can clearly see how an organization that is, uh, I'd say, some kind of monopoly or a government organization, where they could kind of clearly control, they can be successful,
Mm,
because they control something, some resource,
mm.
whether that's
There are no
maybe,
competitors, so it's hard to define if
no
they're more
competitors,
successful or not.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of government organizations, because government controls certain things, are in that middle bureaucratic,
Yeah.
kind of zone, and or in some level of it. I think, I think like a dictatorship, I mean, like,
Yeah. But I
you
guess
know,
what's behind my question is that,
successful for
it,
who, right?
yeah, like, is it a personal preference that I don't want to work at a pathological or bureaucratic organization? Or is it more objective, like these kind of organizations are doomed to fail?
Oh,
Or maybe not fail, but not live up to their potential.
North Korea is probably in that pathological category, and some might argue, other
Yeah.
kind
Not
of
just
countries as well.
messengers are shut there,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Like, really shot probably, I don't know,
Yeah.
but, like, um, long term, is that a successful model? Probably not, but, I mean, clearly they have some level
Yeah,
of
survival.
success
Yeah.
for some elite small
But
group of
but
people that would
that's an
you
extreme.
choose to
But
be there?
let's look at like there's a company who is let's forget pathological, but bureaucratic.
Mm,
And maybe it can attract these kind of folks who can work comfortably in this kind of setup.
mm,
They like being told what to do. Uh,
mhm.
what do you think about that?
Well, I've written about theory X and theory Y, and that I think people are inherently, uh, there's a creativity inherent in people, and oh, you have it ready.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
it.
I was sorry.
But I do think that, and there's a table in there that you might want to scroll down to, actually,
Mm,
um,
that's it, right?
in this, and I just think that people are mostly, uh, you can unlock something inside, people, in that theory Y world, and, with the right environment, and that people are generally, I mean, if you live in a very much theory X organization that believes in it, you might find that people who are in this bureaucratic whatever, there's a creativity in the rest of their lives, that they express themselves in other
Mhm.
places if they can't express it in work. So,
Yeah.
and the ideal is to unlock that creativity and that that motivation that you can get from people more in if you create the right and better, like the generative environment in Westrom's typology. So, of course, an organization can be successful, and I think also what you see is organizations shift over time, as they
Mm.
grow. So I think that's another aspect of it. Like scale often results in going into bureaucratic mode, and maybe even on the extreme onto the other extreme.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, they can
Especially.
still be
Yeah.
successful, but long term, and are those places that people really enjoy working in? I don't think so. Uh, and but let's put it this way: going I'm not intentionally gonna create a bureaucratic or pathological organization. My goal is to try and treat people in with the philosophy of theory Y to create a generative learning environment, and that's my bet, and that I think
Yeah.
most people want to be part of that, and um,
Yeah. I'm
you know,
very similar. The way I explain is this question comes up sometimes in interviews that what kind of organization do I prefer? And when I'm explaining this, what is theory, why is enabling people and building
mhm,
this kind of organization is that I'm this is what I did in the last 20 something years. This is what I can, this is the environment where I can bring value to a company. This is the culture where I can strive and where I can help people. I can accept if other companies are not in this operating according to these principles. It's just then we are probably not a good match because I don't think I can bring value to those companies.
exactly. Yeah, we're not a good match.
Yeah, yeah, and,
Uh,
and there is no judgment in that.
mm,
Like I if I find out during interviews or discussions that a company is operating like this in theory X or some
mm,
form, because this is a scale also probably, then all right, good for them. Like
mm,
we're not gonna help each other, and it's mutual. Like
yeah.
they're probably not gonna be better off hiring me because I'm just gonna cause trouble.
Yeah, and just an interesting thing on this, if you are interviewing with an organization and you're looking for that, that's what everyone's probably looking for. The companies have a lot of marketing and selling themselves
Yeah,
on it. I think you need to ask some kind of behavioral questions yourself of the organization, and of the leader, and tell me about a time when, maybe I can try and dig up some questions and try and put it in
I
show
mean
notes,
you
but,
can.
like,
That's a good
you
and
ask,
it. Yeah,
like, "Tell me about how you dealt with this particular thing,"
exactly. Yeah,
and, well, that tells you a lot. I will say, like, I've been fooled by people in interviews, who say one thing, and then the reality of their behavior in the actual environment is completely different.
yeah.
It's just hard. It's really hard.
It's really hard. But when you started to say this, I was thinking in a situation when I'm applying to a job, for example,
Mm,
and because this is important. Like a lot of people, maybe not engineering leaders, but someone less senior, they don't think of interviewing as a discussion. They think of interviewing as a test where they
mm,
need to perform in order to be accepted. When in reality, I think interviewing is almost like dating. It's like
mm,
you need to figure out if this relationship is going to work or not. So actually asking behavioral questions from the interviewer, I think it's a very good idea. Like
mm.
maybe next time I'm in a situation, I have a chance to talk with a CTO or CEO or something. I can ask something about what was the latest project that was delayed and how did you manage that? And And the answer can, like, if they are focusing on, I don't know, punishments or consequences or this kind of thing, that's a huge red flag.
Hmm.
And if if they just embrace the learning and figuring out what led to the delay and the process changes they did after, that can be a good sign.
There's an article I have in my Readwise, which I'll try and link to in the show notes, which is about questions to ask a CEO. And I think there's some good ones in there that people can adapt
Mm,
and change even to like a manager or a senior manager or director or whatever
yeah.
when you're interviewing them.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm also planning to write a series about getting hired as an engineering manager, focusing on the CV part, applications, interviewing, and then the offer.
mhm,
It's I think it's a good topic, especially in this climate. How to balance technical contributions, how to prepare for those interviews if you are not hands-on, and also this is a great aspect. Like, if usually for these positions you have a chance to talk with the CTO or CEO, and those discussions can be very important,
mhm,
both for increasing or decreasing your chances of getting hired, and both
mhm.
for figuring out if the company is.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Um, Certainly, I think like there's something around, did this company have a return to office? How was that run? That's a really topical thing, but I do think that
Yeah,
a lot of companies have done quite a violent return to office. I would,
maybe this could be a last topic because I'm
yeah,
curious of your opinion why that's happening and if
mm,
it's permanent or temporary, and then I have some theories also.
yeah. That's the I mean, well, my view is that it is a way to kind of in the wartime mode that we talked about earlier
Yeah.
to I think there's 2 aspects of this, or maybe few aspects, and there's, like so one interesting aspect could be your company might need to be sold. It might be harder to sell your company if people are remote.
Mm,
Might be easier if they're all in an office. I don't know why, but, like, sometimes acquirers might be easier to shape a deal. So,
yeah.
cynically, I think that it could be, one of the aspects. I think the other is, I suspect that VCs are also and the limited partners of VCs are behind a lot of the real estate, and they're seeing that, like, basically low utilization and emptiness, and so there's a kind of maybe a what do I call it? Like, what do you call it when you have, like, conspiracy theory? It's like maybe a conspiracy
I
theory
think it is,
really,
but yeah.
but they're, like the LPs are applying pressure on VCs to get people back in the office. I
Yeah.
do think it's a general tactic to if I can see people, and I know they're there, I can, like, see if they're really working. I just actually think that's such a fake thing. I just wanna make it aside that I think it's easier to fake that you're doing something in an office
Oh,
than
yeah, you're
remote
there.
because
You're violently typing in front of your computer.
pretending, you have a coffee chat, everyone, you're,
Mm,
like, really
yeah,
you network, people like you, et cetera, but maybe you're actually really not delivering any results, whereas when you're remote, like, you really have to focus on a different style of management that focuses on outcomes and
yeah.
results. And, but I just don't think that people are really set up, and most companies that went hybrid or remote, they didn't really adjust the management style to deal with being hybrid or remote. They just, like, tried to do a transpose of what they were already doing, and they didn't level up management, and they didn't change a lot of the ways of working, so it was really creaking, and the easiest hack, quick fix is to go back to how we were doing it rather than to, constantly improve and iterate. That would be
Yeah.
my take. I you might have some theories on it too, but
I mean,
no.
I'm mostly aligned, except I
Mm,
think it's a conspiracy theory that it's just the real estate market behind this. But I know you didn't say that.
yeah.
Um, I have a more generic explanation that aligns with some of the stuff you said. I think it's because of this wartime. It's because of this companies needs to struggle to survive. And in this situation, anything that's a little bit of an outlier, it gets cut off. It makes
Mm,
sense because you don't want to take risks. You don't want to take experiment. And distributed work is still a risk and it's still an experiment to some extent. it's like there was this saying that nobody got fired for buying IBM. It's this is the default. People are working from an office. I mean, unfortunately, but if you have to stand in front of your board and explain the bad results of the previous quarter, you really don't want to have outliers in that speech. You don't want to have to explain why am I sticking to people working from home when the investors, other companies, portfolio companies, they all return to office. It's just you need to remove those outliers, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and it's tragic
Mhm.
because it's a huge change in people's lives, in work
Mhm.
experiences. It creates all these weird situations when you need to decide who are you actually calling back to the office. What do you do with people who
Mhm.
relocated, bought a house
Mhm.
in the countryside? Do you fire them for this, or do
Mhm.
you just treat them differently and don't require them to
Mhm.
come to the office, or what do you do? What do you do with remote
Mhm.
folks? Like 2 years ago, there was this big boom of hiring people from the same time zone but different countries. South America, Africa, Eastern Europe. There were a lot of people hired for that and became important parts of
Mhm.
teams. What do you do with that? How do you maintain this team health if part of those teams are now forced through this sudden change of work? And I don't want to make it smaller, the impact of the office, the
Mhm.
positive impact of the office, being in the same space with your colleagues, sharing a meal,
Mhm.
just being able to see them if they are very busy or they might be open for a quick question. That's very powerful. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of companies is not happening in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think, like, the way that we talk about this, it's not we're anti being in the office. In fact, we love getting people together in an
Yeah.
office. I just think you can have the effects of that office, by intentionally bringing people back on very focused days where they're doing workshops and
Mm,
really taking advantage of that FaceTime and, without, um having people in an office, but actually mostly on video calls or whatever, like they're still in back-to-back meetings and
yeah.
in a worse environment for that. And I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I just think that part of the demographic of the leadership of most of these companies is usually older white men. uh,
I mean, the older
so-
I can explain, like you need some certain experience to get to the
yeah, but it's not a very diverse crowd of these leaders,
yeah.
and I think the biggest victims of the back to the office, and the way that it's been driven in a lot of companies is the more diverse, the minorities, the caregivers who are primarily women, or and so on. and
Yeah.
and and I think like that none of all of that has been really disregarded in it. And
Yeah.
and the VCs are also mostly, old white men,
Yeah.
and so it's just, I just think that there's like, I this is why I'm saying I think this is a good test, because if, you ask about that, and you ask about were
Mhm.
you fully remote, and then do you do a switch, and how does that go? You can talk to some of the other
Yeah.
colleagues. You can I think it can tell you a lot about the culture of the leadership of how that change was driven.
Yeah.
And there are companies
Yeah.
that did
Where
it
did
better
the
than
idea
others,
come from? How did they implement? Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So
Yeah.
that just that so segueing back to that, but I do think, like, testing for the behavior, and that is the behavior of the leadership. That's their behavior. That is the culture that you're going
Mm,
to have. It
mm.
trickles down.
Cool. Nice. And we went 13 minutes over time.
We always have a chat
It's
about this. I
painful.
always say to Peter, it doesn't need to be 1 hour. It can be, we can drift it. We can go into other topics.
I mean, I'm this kind of person. If it was scheduled for 1 hour, it should be 16 minutes max, maybe even less. Like, but this is coming from my professional life. Like when we
Yeah.
have back to back meetings, you just cannot afford it. And also, you don't want to set up as an example of someone who goes overtime. And
Mm, no.
yeah, but this is not. Yeah.
This was an interesting kind of diversion, and I mean, I don't know if there was anything else you want to talk about in the cultural, piece, but certainly I felt like, it was
No.
worthwhile talking about
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
of this.
I like last time. I still have a lot of questions, but I don't want to open new pathways. Being overtime, I guess this is still a lesson to
Yeah.
minimize. But I think This was a better balance than the previous one, maybe.
Yeah. Well, for the folks that are listening live, and I see there's maybe a few of you that have been
Mhm.
dropping in, and really appreciate having all of you with us for the live show. Um,
Likewise.
for, for the folks that are on the podcast as well, I'm hopefully there's a few more of you on that. But we're in the early stages, so we'd love, brutally honest feedback. The other thing that helps us is giving us reviews, ideally 5-star reviews or likes and whatever. Um, but definitely, I guess we're in the friends and family stage of the show.
You left out
So
fools.
fools, no, wouldn't call any of our listeners fools.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate it also, and as Jeremy said, it's great to have feedback because it helps us shape the content and the format
Mm,
and everything to appeal to a bigger audience. But I just want to point out that if there would be zero people listening to this, I had fun.
yeah.
I just like with writing this my newsletter and post, it helps me thinking about
Mm,
stuff and being able to discuss with someone. That was one of the learnings from last week. Is for me is that it's the next level of internalizing some
mm,
knowledge and like currently today's discussion, it helped me resolve this conflict between changing behavior, changing the environment.
mm,
I think I reached a good point of understanding this idea and that it's not a conflict. So
mm,
I had a very good discussion. Thanks a lot. And
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm looking for a topic where we violently disagree with each other, Peter.
Yeah, you have
That'll
to
be
fight.
interesting.
Yeah, maybe the tubeless is gonna be there.
Stupidest. I don't know. Yeah.
We'll see. All right.
Well, brilliant. Oh, and if you happen to be on LinkedIn, and we
Oh
are
yeah.
trying to be able to stream to LinkedIn without streaming to our profiles because that is more complicated. We need to get to 150 followers of our retrospective page. So we'd love it if you did follow along that page if it's interesting. Feel free to or don't. It's not a problem. But we are trying to get there. We've got 33. We'd love
Yeah.
to get higher to 150.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's like a good measure of like our initial momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Have a great day.
Brilliant. Cheers, Peter. Have a
Talk to you
great
next
day.
week.
Yeah.
Bye.